to know.
You're listening to Phyla and Fandom, a podcast on the Nerd Sloth Network ran by two furry scientists, your resident zoologist, Dr. Wildlife,
and bug lover me, Nassie.
Each week, we'll be exploring the world around us by discussing current topics in our own scientific fields, as well as current happenings in fandom-based subcultures like the furry fandom.
Today's date is May 21st, 2019, and this will be episode 5. So today for our guests, we have some big names in the fandom and some very positive forces in the fandom. We have Moms of Furries, Carrie and Joelle. They're YouTubers, bloggers, and communication educators in the fandom that run several blogs and do a lot of YouTube videos giving information to other parents in the of furries in the fandom. So welcome, community moms.
Hi. Hi. We're glad to be here. We are.
And we're happy to have you guys.
Yeah, we're so happy to have you. And today we're going to be talking about all things travel. So Doc and I will be talking about our experience doing field work and traveling abroad for our research, and then also just generally what we kind of see around the world. And then for the furry section, we're going to talk about traveling for conventions, like what that's like, what to expect, what you should bring, and what are our favorite cons to go to. Yes, lots of travel.
So I don't know. I think one of the coolest things to probably talk about, this isn't brag hour, but I'm always interested in seeing how far people have traveled. So I was very fortunate and lucky, I guess, to have parents that were able to help me do this. But one of my first field research experiences was actually all the way down into New Zealand, like literally the South Island. So that's pretty freaking far.
Yeah, from your current
that
location.
Far as an undergrad researcher. But I mean, you don't have to travel far for some cool field research, honestly, like even in your backyard, as we've discussed in previous podcasts. Like you can find some cool things right in your neighborhood, and they're almost as cool because New Zealand has penguins. So, you know, but they're almost as cool as those critters that you have in your backyard. I think, anyway.
Yeah, I think so too.
So how far have you traveled, Nazi? Or I guess like it doesn't have to be how far, but like what's one really memorable destination for you?
The biggest place that I've traveled to, or the farthest, is Peru. I went there with my parents when I think I was 12 at the time, and we went on this big 2-week long trip. It was really cool because we visited Machu Picchu. And my my favorite memory from the trip to Machu Picchu, which is like the structures are the natural wonder, are the one of the wonders of the world.
Yeah.
Was that there was like this cool ant colony that I saw crossing one of the stone paths, and I was like fixated on that more than the vista.
I was about to be like, is this an ant story?
Yeah.
And then you told, yes, it was.
Yeah. I have yet to be across the Atlantic though, for whether that's like for a con or for field work yet.
One day. But Peru's pretty awesome. Like I've always wanted to go down there. South America is like, I wouldn't say next up on my list because I don't think that's going to be the next place I travel. But like in terms of places, new places to try and get myself to go, definitely somewhere in South America, because there's like, I mean, ants are cool, but there's a lot of cool birds down there too.
Birds, okay.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I'm sure you can appreciate that too, right? Like,
no, of course.
Oh, okay. I thoued you were about to say no. Like, no, I do not appreciate it.
No, I appreciate it because I am also the prettiest bird.
Oh, the prettiest bird, yeah. But that's awesome. I mean, if you had to go across the Atlantic, where would you go? And would it be for a con or field work?
Oh, it's tough.
You can't do both. You have to choose one.
No. I think I would probably go to New Zealand because one of my lifelong goals has been to see the glowworm caves.
Oh, yeah.
And I had the opportunity last, when was it? Last March, I believe, because my husband went to a conference there for his work. But unfortunately, I had a exam going on at the same time that I had for the course that I was teaching. And so I couldn't make it.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it made me sad. But I will get there at some point. Perhaps if he goes to the same conference next year, I'll try and go there.
Be a tag along.
Yeah.
Go on your own little adventure.
But other than that, my goal for across seas would be Eurofurence for sure.
Oh, yeah. I thought about going to that, and then I slept through the hotel opening or something. I forgot what happened. I slept through something that's necessary for going, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but yeah, not in the cards this time around.
No. I think you have or there was a European con that you two are going to, right, Carrie and Joel?
We want to,
but as of yet, nothing's scheduled.
Only domestic so far. Yeah. But we hope to. We really want to go everywhere. But
Eurofurence is really the one that we'd love to get to.
We could all go together.
In Canada.
Yeah, we want to go to Canada.
We are really considering furry.
I think that's the most likely for us to do.
Nice. Yeah, I have a few friends that are going to furry. I think one of my friends is the guest of honor this year too.
Ooh, really?
Where's that one at?
That one's in Vancouver, I believe.
Yeah, Vancouver. I thought.
I know they have Vancouver.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought there was Vancouver.
Oh, maybe.
Right.
Or maybe Furry is the Alberta one. Here, I'll look it up right now.
I was looking too.
Whoever finds it first.
Yes, Alberta.
Alberta. Okay, yeah.
I think Megaplex is the only one we did not drive to. Right.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you should definitely come up to Canada sometime, though. I would recommend Fernal Equinox, and I'm sure Doctor would recommend Fernal Equinox for next year.
Yeah, because I'm a guest of honor there. So, I mean,
that would be fantastic.
Congratulations.
Yes.
Thank you. It would be so much fun because, I mean, I really wanted to go up there for a con anyway, and then this happened. So I was like, gotta happen now, right? They're inviting me up here. I can't just say no.
Yeah, exactly.
When you call it a place like that, it's a sign you should do it.
Yes.
All right. So that will be my first time up to Canada. I've never been before, so.
Neither have I.
No, and it's so close, really.
It is close.
That's not bad. The drive is not bad at all for us.
Yeah.
You don't look at me
Joelle
like that.
will drive anywhere. If there was one in Alaska, she'd be like, "Oh yeah, I can drive. The pipeline's fine. It's the street. We'll go."
It'd be like, I don't know if y'all have seen the episode of it, but it'd be like that episode of BoJack where they build the bridge to Hawaii. It takes forever to drive on. It has a hotel in the middle of it that's on a stand in the water, so people to take a break at.
Whatever.
I mean, realistically, how long would that take? Because, I don't really know the distance over to Hawaii. And now I'm, getting kind of curious.
It's the farthest. The islands of Hawaii are the most isolated of any landmass on the planet. So I think by ship, it's 5 days.
Oh, wow.
So it would be a long bridge. I think it's unlikely.
Maybe just a little bit.
But I would I heard that there was there's a con in Hawaii, but it's sort of an everything con because Hawaii is small. So that's furry and anime and whatever you want to do.
Huh. Do you remember what that one's called?
QuaiCon, I think.
Yeah, I think it's QuaiCon.
But it's on Oahu. We met a furry at BLFC this weekend who was telling us about it because we didn't think there was one in Hawaii. And if there can be one in Orlando in August, there can be one in Hawaii.
It's true.
Yeah, I think the only worst option than Orlando in August is Texas in July, because Furry Siesta, which I'm staff for, so I'm not completely hating on it, but Furry Siesta is in July, and last year it was an absolute nightmare because like the hotel was under renovations, so a lot of the AC units weren't on, or I don't know. It was really weird. Like, it was one of the hottest summers in Texas, and then inside the building, the AC units couldn't keep up with it. So, like, you'd go outside and be like 115 degrees Fahrenheit or so. And I know this is a science podcast and I'm using Fahrenheit, so I apologize. But it was 115 degrees Fahrenheit. And then you come in and it still felt like 80 or 90, which, you know, by itself is fine, but like not when you've been outside or if you're fursuiting. So it was just like an absolute nightmare is the best way of putting it. Like, it was just ridiculous. And of course, Fuse had just moved here from Colorado. And so, or actually it was before he moved. So like he was living in Colorado at the time. And so he comes back for this con and we're trying to fursuit in it. And it's like literal death. It's like, you're just dead everywhere.
Yeah. I imagine, especially in the protogen suit.
I lived in Dallas once, and when I moved there, I was in the hotel room, which, you know, your hotel room can get nice and cool. I took a shower, came out. As soon as I stepped into the corridor of the hotel, I just melted, and I was in a t-shirt and shorts. So I can't imagine even wearing a partial in that kind of humidity and heat. It would just be deadly.
Yeah. Yeah. Luckily, we didn't have any like medical issues related to overheating, like from a staff standpoint, but I'm sure like some people kind of came close to it just because it was so miserable. But like people are going to want to suit regardless. Like people probably suit if it was like 200 degrees Fahrenheit and be like, I just gotta do it kind of thing. But I mean, less on the topic of fur cons, and I'm going to circle back to like field work, or I say less on the topic of fur cons, but this next comment is actually kind of about them. You know, traveling for field work is oddly similar to traveling for fur cons, I feel like, because you're still packing a lot of things to get you through a set amount of time. It's just less furry carpet suits and more crazy nerdy instruments. So nerdy in a different way.
Yeah.
You know, I think so anyway.
Well, when you're traveling for a con, you have to pack your stickers, your pins, you know.
Yeah.
Your badges, all that stuff. Yeah.
Your hats and things.
And then for me, field work is just so it is actually kind of simple to compared to what some people do, because I just do acoustic recorders. So I mean, it's a lot of batteries and such, but most of what I do is just contained in one like green box. Like one little tiny green box. But I feel like Nazi being an entomologist, and maybe not just for yourself, but like any entomologist, I feel like there's a lot of little things that you have to bring with you, right? Like a lot of moving parts.
Yeah. And it's kind of like, it's funny because I work with something so much smaller, but the work that I do requires a lot more like preparation and like in terms of like expedition stuff, because I'm doing especially for my master's, a lot of it is the taxonomy stuff, right? So the goal of that is to explore the most distant and humanly separated part of the environment, and then try and collect as many ants or whatever species of insect that I'm looking for at the time. But been recently ants that I'm trying to find. So there was one research expedition that I did to Mount Katahdin in Maine. And what we were doing was traveling up and down the mountain every day to try and see if we could find different diversity of ants along the elevational gradient, like at different elevations along the mountain slope. And because it's like there's no cell coverage, there's no access by road or anything like that. We had to take everything we needed for this like week-long field excursion on our backs. Yeah. And and there's no running water or anything like that either. So we had to also bring anything we need to sterilize water and all the food we need and all that stuff. So it was like these massive packs the size of us, maybe weighing like 2 times as much as we did, each of us. And there's like 5 of us. And we're bringing all this up in conjunction with all the vials that we need, all of the like transect tapes that we need, all of the GPS units and other recording devices and that kind of thing. So it was crazy. It was like what I imagine a hard boot camp is kind of like, but it was so much fun because I'm weird and I love just being able to do that, to find this small little ant and say, hey, nobody's found this before.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never done like field work that involves finding new species. Everything I've done has been working with purely working with existing species. But my PhD advisor, that was his task, but he would go all the way to like really remote regions of Sumatra and try and find like new herp species. So herp meaning, for those that haven't heard the word, herp meaning like reptiles and amphibians. So all of our, and I hate saying this because I hate perpetuating stereotypes, but in a way they're right. All the scaly, slimy things is what a herp is. And like I said, I do, people that are herpetologists probably listening to this and being like, she said it. Now I can't support her. But it's, as much as you hate it, it's accurate. So he would go out there and do that, but he would like find them around volcanoes. So it's like, imagine what you did, but it's like really hot and humid and muggy and, and you're carrying all of that. So, I think everybody knows how difficult field research can be, but until you actually go out there and like try and carry stuff around, you just don't fully understand it, like it's just next level.
Yeah. And one of the things I kind of like to compare field biologists to is like, all those crazy explorer people that you see that just want to like climb Mount Everest because they said they could. It's like we're doing the same thing, but for the diversity and for like science's sake. So we're trying to like go to the most treacherous areas of the planet, like the edge of a volcano, just to be like, hey, there's a new species of bacteria here or something like that. And I think that's like, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool to see, because everybody thinks of biologists as these nerdy people that are like sitting in a lab, like tinkering away with tools, especially people that work with insects. They think of them as like people with thick glasses that are sitting underneath a microscope looking at little bugs all day. But realistically, the people that are on the forefront of this in like in environments and like looking for these things, they're the people that are the most fit because they need to be.
Yeah. And that's true. I mean, I kind of had a small taste. Well, I've done field work quite a bit, but like I said, it's different than what you were just describing for the most part, except I did some aquatic ecology research way back in undergrad. And what we studied, you'll get excited about this, was aquatic insects. And little tiny aquatic invertebrates that basically, when we're looking at them underneath the microscope, you have like a high quality microscope and you're using the tiniest of forceps to like sort them out of everything that you collected in the water. And you're trying to ID them by the tiniest of details and you kind of go cross-eyed doing it.
Yeah.
But, we would go out into like the Ozark Mountains and such. And fortunately, the Ozark Mountains, they're pretty remote, but you can kind of get vehicles pretty close to things. So we didn't have to haul stuff as much as what you were describing, but it was still just so tedious. And it serves such a wonderful purpose, though, because specifically where we would do aquatic ecology in the Ozark Mountains was where fracking was pretty prevalent. So the idea was to look at the tiniest part of the ecosystem, these aquatic invertebrates, to see what kind of change was happening. Because, a lot of people, not just with fracking, but any environmental, like a perceived negative environmental influence, people are often like, well, I'm not seeing anything happen, so it's probably not causing a problem. So, we were looking at the tiniest of things where change was happening, where it was beginning to trickle into the ecosystem. And so that's pretty cool. I mean, the lab I worked for, I was just like an undergrad research assistant for them. And but they pushed out a lot of cool papers with it. So it's, I mean, I really don't know in that sense how big of a difference it has made so far, because of course fracking still happens in Arkansas. It happens everywhere, but that doesn't mean it didn't make a difference, at least, because it puts like pressure on policymakers and all these government bodies. It tells them to kind of take a pause before they make a decision. So I still think it makes a difference. It's just maybe not as dramatic as you would, as a scientist, you would hope for.
Yeah. One of the like hardest things associated with travel, I feel like, for especially, I mean, it kind of falls in line with the furry stuff too, like the things that you want to bring with you, especially across borders and stuff like that. Like for furries, it can be kind of daunting to bring your fursuit head across the border because you're like, oh, what are they going to think? Are they going to like stop me and think I'm weird and that kind of thing? But one of the hardest things is biologists that have field work across seas or across borders, and they are trying to bring back specimens or something like that.
Oh,
yeah, it's like so I have two stories associated with that. One is my previous advisor. He would go down to South America to do a collection of ants across elevational gradients to look at how climate change is impacting the species of insects in general on mountains, because insects down in the tropics, they usually only have a very limited range for their where they can exist. Usually it's around like 100 meters squared, even sometimes. And so if climate is changing, it's going to affect those small ranges more, because any changes in degrees at all are going to push them along like a mountain slope. It's going to try and drive them to go up the slope to get a little bit cooler, because the surface of the like ground or at ground level is a little bit warming up a little by little. And so he's monitoring this over time, but he always has to bring down vials of ethanol, because that's how we store insects, especially if we want to preserve their DNA. And coming back from there, he's always stopped at the airport because he has like vials and vials of insects coming back into Canada, and the Border Patrol is like, what are you doing with all this ethanol and ants? And it happens every single time.
Really, get a load of this crazy person, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it usually ends up in them being confiscated for a couple hours, having to be on call with somebody at the university or somebody higher up in government. And then like they're given the okay that they can travel without being put in prison.
Right. I mean, that's happened before with like, so this isn't necessarily field research, it's wildlife rehab, but when I worked at the Dallas World Aquarium, they would partner with a manatee rehab center down in Peru, of all places, going back. See, everything connects back to the beginning of these podcasts, always.
Yeah.
They would do manatee rehab work down there, mainly manatee calves. They have a high risk of, especially in like Peru and parts of South America, they would, they have issues with being abandoned. So these baby manatees often have to be bottle raised. And so one time they were going down there and took a bunch of like bags of like dehydrated milk and stuff for the manatees. And they confiscated all of it, like thousands of dollars of milk, basically.
No.
And I understand because it's like a food product, right? But it's so difficult, because I understand why governments do that for like biosecurity and stuff. But like they had permits and everything, and it was all confiscated, right? It's awful. You never know what you're going to encounter. Yeah. And then sometimes they don't care at all, and they're just like, me. And you're like, wow, I wonder what else gets through our borders.
Oh, yeah. Well, along those lines, like my second story is a little more illegal. And so I'm not going to name any names associated with this, but it's somebody that is very, very, very dedicated to their work at a certain museum. So this person that I know was supposed to be on vacation in Italy, and they brought their wife with them on this vacation. And while they were on this vacation, they went to the fish market, and they bought as much shellfish as they could. They ended up going to a local park, and they ended up collecting some organisms they shouldn't have on their walk. They preserved them in their hotel room, and then they brought an extra suitcase along with them to bring back specimens for the museum. And and they did this without any permits or anything. They just did this because it was their vacation, and they cannot separate work from vacation. So they were like, this will be fun. I'm going to do this, and it'll be great specimens for the museum. They were extremely lucky that they didn't get caught at the border because they would be in prison forever. But now the museum has a whole bunch of specimens from Italy.
And we're just like talking about this like this kind of a one-off thing, but I mean that's how museums used to get their stuff, like primarily, like every single one of them.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Like, I'm going to go pilfer this place, and I'm going to take this, and I'm going to make some money on it.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I'm over here shuddering at the thought, but I don't want to encourage such behavior, obviously, but every great museum, if you took away every specimen in there that was taken by those means, they'd be gone. Like, they'd be empty. And it's sad. It really is sad. But I think people have, for the most part, have changed.
Oh yeah, it's like it's all about learning, right? Like we had to start somewhere, and now we're at the point where like, all right, we have to be respectful.
or try to at least.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think one of the coolest things, especially when you're traveling by land, which is something that we talked about earlier, I think one of the coolest aspects of that is just seeing like scenery changes and such, like probably one of the most common places that I go to or drive to where I see a lot of scenery changes is to Colorado, because I've driven there for like a ski trip with some friends. And then I've also driven there for Denver. So going from Dallas, Texas, and then going into like beautiful, not that Dallas isn't beautiful, but beautiful West Texas, which is like on the border of being flat and hilly. And it just beautiful scenery. And then all of a sudden you're in Colorado and you're greeted by these huge mountains. Each of those habitat types or scenes, they're beautiful in their own little way, even Dallas skyline. But I think what is even more beautiful is seeing the change, like in real time as you're driving through and witnessing that. And I think that's something that you miss when you're on a plane, unless somehow there's no clouds at all. And you can actually...
Which is one of the reasons that I love to drive. I've driven coast to coast a few times, and it's amazing to see just all of the different landscapes within our country. Mm-hmm. I love it.
Oh, definitely. What would both of you say was one of your favorite things to see, like while driving? Like, is there any particular moment that you can think about that was like one of your favorite habitat changes to witness?
Well, for me, this is Carrie. I lived on the Big Island of Hawaii, and what's so interesting about the Big Island in particular is you have the wet side of the island, which is really humid, and there's just lots of green, lush trees, and it's gorgeous. And then as you drive, the Kona side of the island is very dry and hot, like the desert. It's not as green. It's really, it's super, super dry. It's harder to grow things that would grow, like you can't grow coffee there as well as you can on the wet side of the island. And then as you go up the island, there's snow. It gets so cold, the climate changes entirely, and that's where they have the telescopes. So just on this one small island in the middle of the Pacific, you can see pretty much everything.
Yeah.
I know Hawaii has some dramatic landscapes, but you saying snow, like, I don't think that's something that a lot of people think about when they think about Hawaii. And even me, like, it's something that I forget happens. Over there.
Yeah, I mean, you don't really think about it, but it can get really cold. And on the Hilo side of the island, it rains every day. And then as you go up to where the snow is, the elevation is so steep that unless you're in good health, you really shouldn't go because the air is so thin. So it's just fascinating to me how much the land can change. It's a small island. I mean, you could do it all in one day. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think driving through Utah surprised me the first time. It's gorgeous. It's absolutely gorgeous, but I know down around the Grand Canyon, you think of that landscape, but I'm talking Salt Lake City, the Antelope Island, all of those places. Oh my goodness. Going out, I will tell you something that shocked us, whale watching at San Francisco. Going out, now I cannot remember the name of the islands, but there's research out there. You get close to the island and these flies attack the boat. And we took them back to the bay with us. That was something no one's ever told me about. Yeah, it was crazy. That's cool. Yeah.
That's one of the things that I really want to do. I don't feel like my life has had enough whale watching trips.
Oh, so interesting. You just never know. We had dolphins, and watching humpback whales just feet from you is amazing. It's amazing.
It's like the manatees out in Florida, watching the manatees. They're so majestic in the way they move and slow.
And I don't think a lot of people realize that when you go on these trips, that a lot of these places that host these, or I shouldn't say places, a lot of these companies that host these trips, a lot of them these days also host research.
Right.
Like I've been out to view great white sharks in South Africa, and the company I went with was actually one of the biggest, it was actually partnered with one of the biggest research projects for great whites out there, and one of the biggest conservation projects. So I think sometimes, of course, there's always bad ecotourism, as I call it, or bad animal tourism. That's everywhere. But a lot of these like touristy things that seem really gimmicky, like I love whale watching, but obviously it's kind of gimmicky when you look at it.
Absolutely. Right.
But a lot of them do
have like visitors that want to do all of the sea lions at the wharf. They have to do the whale watching.
Yeah. But I mean, so many of them do such great work. So it's not like it's gimmicky, but at least they're doing something with it. And that circles back to us talking about field research, that even tourists can participate in it, even if you don't really have a science background yourself. You can participate in it just by going on these trips and like funding them, basically.
Yeah,
absolutely. Honestly, I don't remember for sure, but this company may have had some sort of partnership with the researchers on the island. The Phyla Islands, I think, is what it was. But anyway, yes.
So we just brought up some really good stories involving y'all traveling for what sounds just for fun, but what has been your favorite like traveling to a con experience? And you can't say BLFC because
well,
that's cheating.
BLFC is just about 5 minutes away. So.
Yeah. So I was like, you can't say it.
Well, it is and it isn't, because we have to leave and go be mom and then go back and be Moms of Furries and leave.
Yeah, it is easier to just be at the hotel. But we were talking about that because we were trying to decide. We love them all for so many different reasons, but we think the most meaningful to us has been Anthro Northwest.
Yeah.
Because we had our Young Furry Chill Space, and we met not only so many kids, but so many parents. Some parents that were totally into it and supportive, some parents who were more hesitant, concerned, confused, and it was just very nice to be able to connect with people in a safe, quiet environment and kind of, I don't know, it felt like our little mini event inside the con. And that for us is probably the most meaningful.
Well, and I'm really proud of our chill space anyway, just to offer that as a place for kids and parents to take a little bit of a break and congregate. But that was also our longest road trip.
It together. Was our longest road trip, and we were pretty crazy. Just out of exhaustion, because we thought what we'll do is we will take everybody to school, we'll pack up the car. When they get out of school, we'll just drive all night. Right. No problem.
Oh, no.
and it's like 12 and a half hours, and then get to the con, set up, and go that day, and which is what we did. But turns out we were idiots. That's not
No. And it really didn't hit us until we returned.
No, yeah, it took us a while. Talk about PCD. That was a little ambitious, but just the experience of getting to meet so many other families, and our kids met other kids, and parents, for some of them thanked us because they felt like they had that place to go to. And we had an opportunity for kids to make their own badges, because if you're in the fandom, you have a badge, and kids don't always have a badge. It costs money, and they don't necessarily have a character or a persona.
Well, and their parents aren't necessarily supporting them spending money in the fandom.
Exactly. And so they could come to our chill space, and we had blanks that they could color in, and they could change them however they want. This one kid, he probably made a dozen badges, and just for them to kind of join in and participate in the fandom, it didn't cost them anything. Their parents could kind of chat. They could have some downtime, because I don't think we're alone. The first time you go to a convention it can be very overwhelming. There's so much to take in, so many suits and people. And if you happen to have anxiety, it can be even more challenging. So just have a quiet space for them to go to. Anyway, for us, it was an amazing experience.
Yes. I agree.
That sounds incredible. Like, especially it's such a good idea to have the blank badges that people can color in. That's so fun.
Yeah. And they could really express themselves. And some people did amazing things. And then someone in the dealer's den was selling badges, different kinds of badges that they could color in, but she had forgotten her laminator. So we said, just send the kids up. So they were able to take some of those up and have them laminated and put them into action too. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah,
Nice.
and actually, we're going to have the chill space at Furlandia this upcoming weekend.
Yeah.
We leave Thursday. Yeah. We're going to be driving there too.
I think that's been one of the most exciting things to see develop out of what you guys do, is seeing all these chill spaces pop up for younger furries, because I say this all the time. I say it too often, honestly. I wish I would have found the fandom sooner. And I don't know if necessarily the chill spaces in particular would have helped, but I think what you do on your website and just having information for parents there, and then having the chill spaces, I think it makes parents more receptive to kids being involved with it. And I will say this until the day I die, I think everybody deserves to find the fandom regardless of their age, because I don't think I have been a happier person than when I've been in the fandom. And I think more people would be happy and more comfortable with themselves if they found the fandom. Now, I know the fandom's not for everybody, obviously, but it's such a wonderful thing and a wonderful community. As much hate as it sometimes gets on Twitter and the internet from furries or non-furries, it is such a wonderful community, and more people, including kids, deserve to find that and find that support. Especially when you're growing up and things are really tough and you're trying to figure out who you are. And I feel like the fandom kind of offers that way of figuring yourself out.
We definitely agree.
Right. We had someone at our panel this weekend say almost exactly that people outside of the fandom, maybe they don't realize how important, especially in those, older teenage, young adult years, when you are finding yourself, to find this community where you can kind of express yourself in whatever way you express yourself. And it's okay. And you're more than likely to find someone that has similar views or interests as you. So,
and it has definitely changed our kids' lives.
Oh, speaking of our kids, this is Joelle. My teenager was so excited that we were going to be part of this podcast. She is going to, or they are going to be speaking of field research, they have an internship this summer at the University of Wyoming. They're going to do some microbiology, but their plan is hopefully to become a wildlife biologist at some point. They are into falconry, so it may switch specifically to birds at some point. They're going to be a junior in high school next year, so we have some time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
There's
fantastic.
nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. So they were so excited.
Yeah, they were jazzed.
They were like, oh my gosh. They follow all the biologists.
It's very cool because it's hard for us to impress these teenagers. So they don't care about anything. So the fact that your kid was excited is pretty cool.
I know.
Well, I'm glad that we were able to provide that kind of excitement.
Thank you.
Yeah. And that's why we've been enjoying doing this so much, is both of us have noticed that we get those kind of comments, people saying that they enjoy our content because we help them to show them that there's ways that you can enjoy furry and become a biologist, and that there is like ways you can combine your hobbies and your interests and that kind of thing. And it's so great to hear and see. And we want to share that more and more as much as we can.
It's absolutely the truth. I mean, there's so many groups within the fandom of different careers or interests.
Well, I think about Taban, because Taban tweeted out, hey, anybody who wants to catch up with me and talk about calculus. Well, my son loves calculus. So I went right to him and I said, hey, if you see Taban, talk about math. So it's really nice to be able to communicate with other people that have your interests, and you have this common bond. It's,
right, of furry.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, and I think that's happening more and more in the fandom. Like, you're talking about math, and I'm thinking about like quartz and tea leaf and everything.
Oh,
like,
yeah, with stats.
Yeah. And I was like, it's just broadening where I feel like what the root of what we're talking about with the fandom and how it's such an accepting and an awesome place for people that are trying to discover themselves when they're emerging into adulthood. It's kind of showing that other fandoms and other interests need to have that kind of same welcoming feeling. And the fandom's kind of bleeding into those other interests and areas really well, like especially just in like science, as we are a part of, but in seeing it bleed into like anime cons and like sport, even like sports cons and fitness and all that kind of stuff. I'm seeing it everywhere, and it's really, really cool.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I know at SAC Anime last year they had a panel about being furry, and plenty of people came. Not the people that were hosting it, but lots of guests came. So yeah, I like that crossover. I think that's really great.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I was gonna ask y'all a question about like going through airports, but you road trip a lot. So I'm going to switch this question over to Nazi. What has been your experience with traveling with your fursuit?
Oh, yeah. I actually I used to be so scared of flying, and I've flown a lot because I'm originally from New Brunswick, which is like half the country away from Ontario in Canada. And that's where I'm going to school and living now. And so I used to travel back and forth every summer when I was in my undergrad, and I would fly. And I absolutely hated it just because airports are so crowded, and there's like having to go through security, and especially doing it alone, it's like, it's never enjoyable. But my first time bringing my fursuit head on at an airport, like through the security, I was holding it, and one of the security agents was like, "Whoa, is that a bird?" And I was like, "Yep." And they're like, "Go to the front of the line. I want to see you put it on as you go through security."
Oh no.
And so I did. And then, and like, it was so fun and welcoming, and like nobody in the line cared. Like there wasn't that many people ahead of me anyways, but as I was passing by them, they were all like smiling and happy. And then, got through that. And then I went to the, like the customs checkpoint, and the guard there like gave me a stone straight face and was like, "You're all clear. But in order to get through, you have to put your head on and walk down the hallway." And so again,
no.
I did. I put on the head and I walked down the hallway, and then like, all I heard was like a slow clap from the guard behind me, like.
Something I would
like, yeah, and it's exciting, it's fun, and it's like it's funny how like just like having a costume character like that and no context, the people, it just made everybody's days brighter, and it in turn made my day brighter. And like now I love going to airports for traveling to furry cons because I've never not had that kind of experience yet.
It's funny you say that because we don't suit, but we love when we go to conventions to kind of sit back and just people watch the guests that are there unexpectedly that see this happening and the confusion and then delight. We love seeing kids just walk up and grab the legs of fursuiters because they're
a big hug.
Yeah. They're so excited. We always know they're future furries. But for us, that is really exciting, seeing these people that are just like, what's happening? I love it.
Yeah, and I mean, you'll see people, like I said before, you'll see people hating on the furry fandom all over the place, and this kind of deals with more non-furries hating on them. But, they'll be like, well, if you wore that fursuit out in public, people would be freaking out and they'd hate you. And it's like, no, that's like the exact opposite reaction that I have ever gotten. People are always just really curious to see it. I mean, they're either really curious or they stay away, but I haven't had any like overly negative reactions, if that makes sense.
If you look at like some of the YouTube videos where people will suit and then they'll go to Little Caesars and get pizza or something like that, everyone in the shop is always pretty excited. I haven't seen personally any negative reaction. I think there can be negative talk out there, but generally people are like, I don't know what this is, but it's kind of cool.
Yeah.
It's all good natured. I mean, furries generally are out there using good manners and wearing their suits and doing cool stuff. I think it's positive.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I was going to say, speaking of positive, but that's kind of a really terrible transition. Speaking of potentially positive or negative things, it's time for our trivia. It can be positive or negative depending on how you answer these. So I was actually not the one to make the trivia this time around. Nazi did.
Yeah.
So, would you like to lead us on this trivia adventure?
I'll lead the trivia adventure with the moms. And in celebration of the moms, I have picked some good questions pertaining to animal moms. So there's going to be 4 questions and they're all multiple choice. And you just give your answers when I give the questions and we'll see how many you get right. Sound good?
Sounds great. Let's do it.
All right. So the first question, marsupial moms carry their newborns where? A, their back, B, their head, C, a pouch, B, their arms, or D, their arms. I meant to put D.
I didn't even catch that either.
Marsupials, that's pouch, right? I think.
Ding, ding,
Yeah.
ding.
Ding, ding,
That is
ding.
correct. All right. 1 out of 4 right already. Moving along. So, how do crocodile moms keep their newly hatched babies safe? A, leaving them to fend for themselves. B, laying on them. C, keeping them on their back. Or D, storing them in their mouth.
In their mouth. I know this.
Ding, ding. 2 for 4.
I watch a lot of Wildcrats.
Yeah,
Wildcrats is
nice.
so good. They're so good.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you.
All right. Number 3. How long is an elephant's pregnancy? A, 22 months, B, 13 months, C, 36 months, or D, 4 months?
22 months.
Is it?
22 months is correct.
Wow.
I don't know why.
3 out of 4. Man, that's so good. Good.
I just got a comment. It'd be pretty amazing if elephant was able to produce another elephant.
I know.
Oh.
That's a long time to be pregnant, though.
Yeah, 22 months.
Ooh.
Longest, I think it's the longest of any animal on the planet, right, Doctor? Yeah.
Wow.
It's a long time.
I would hope that is the longest for anyone.
All right. And so your final question. This one's a little bit more nerdy. We like to throw a little bit of a nerdy question at the end. What is Judy Hopps' mother's name in Zootopia? A. Betty, B. Bonnie, C. Robin, or D. Amy?
Okay.
What do you think, Joelle?
This is like me trying to come up with Nemo's dad's name.
Yeah.
Gosh,
I was like, not Nemo.
Judy's mom. I'm going to say it's Betty or Bonnie. What do you think?
Betty?
Bonnie?
Bonnie?
Bonnie. Let's go with Bonnie.
Bonnie. Final answer.
Bonnie is correct.
Oh my gosh.
Nice. 4 for 4. The moms know the moms.
That is amazing.
Amazing job.
You can't see us, but we tried to high five and missed.
So don't feel like, we're out to get you with these questions because you're not the only ones that get questions. So each week we have my favorite segment, honestly, Guess Who, which is who with the HOO, like an owl who, because, puns and we're scientists and our puns aren't great, but we think they are. So our segment's called Guess Who. It's basically a weekly trivia section where we play an animal vocalization and you, the audience, have to guess the species. Participants have 1 week to get their answers in by emailing us at phylaandfandom@gmail.com. The first to get the correct answer will get a shout out in the following week's podcast when the answer is revealed, which gets us to the answer for last week. Strange, almost ominous sounding sound was actually a whole troop of howler monkeys, which is pretty ridiculous. And I'm sure some of you were focused on the little bird that's tweeping in the vocalization. That was not who we were looking for. We were looking for the really deep vocalization that you hear all throughout the background. And those were howler monkeys, which are pretty appropriately named, I think. And now for this week's Guess Who. If you think you know the answer to this week's Guess Who, all you have to do is send us an email with your guess to phylaandfandom@gmail.com. Speaking of ways that you can contact us, we're also available on multiple different social media platforms. You can find us and support us on our Patreon by simply looking for Phyla and Fandom. You can also follow us via Phyla and Fandom on Twitter, as well as follow our network, Nerd Sloth, on Twitter and Facebook. You can also find us on our respective social media platforms, aka our personal ones. Mine in particular is pretty easy to find. I am Dr. Wildlife on pretty much everything: YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.
And I am Entobird on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook as well.
And where can we find you guys, Moms of Furries? Though, you know what? This is somewhat of a silly question because I feel like everybody knows you in the fandom now.
That's true.
But you can still tell us just in case.
We are also Moms of Furries pretty much everywhere. We're Moms of Furries on Twitter,
on Instagram, Telegram, YouTube. Our website is MoFurries, MoFurries.com.
That's perfect.
Oddly enough, we couldn't get Moms of Furries
it was taken
for our website. So
it was $83,000.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow. Okay. And just one more shout out to Nerd Sloth for being our network and hosting us. You can find their website just at nerdsloth.com. And as I said, you can find them on Twitter and Facebook under the same name. And with that, I just like to thank both of you for joining us. You've been wonderful guests. Honestly, the time has flown by. And for those of you listening to this, you're like, wow, this is kind of an abrupt ending. We try to stick to an hour at these, and I think we've went over it at this point. Almost. We got a few minutes left to the hour mark. And just talking with both of you just seems so easy.
Yeah.
Thank you. We've had a great time, and we really appreciate being invited to participate.
Absolutely.
And I hope by, hopefully our listeners kind of got a little preview into what it's like to travel for field work as well as to fur cons. I think we've hit almost every major funny story that could possibly happen, other than talking about lost fursuits. But we're a positive podcast, so we try to
we're trying to avoid those scary stories.
Is there anything final that you'd want to add, Joelle or Carrie?
I just that we will be at Furlandia next week, so we hope to see folks out there. Please come say hi to us, and we'll be at Anthro Northwest with the Young Furry Show space in November.
Yeah,
awesome. Well, that'll be great to see around again. Maybe I can make it up there.
Ooh, would love to see you.
It's a beautiful drive right here.
Oh my gosh, I don't know if I'm driving all the way from Texas though. But once again, thank you both for joining us. This has been episode 5 of Phyla and Fandom.